Hola a todos. Today we are going to be talking about the differences between the verbs saber and conocer. Now, both of these verbs mean to know in English, but of course they're used in different contexts. It's the same thing with ser and estar, por and para, etc. In English you have one way of expressing it, and in Spanish you have two ways. Okay? And because they have the same translation, they can be confusing. So you need to know when to use saber and when to use conocer. Okay? Yes. So we are going to start with saber. But another thing, we're not really going to focus on the conjugations. Saber and conocer are irregular verbs, well, mainly in the first person, at least with the present tense, because saber is se and not sabo. But we're not really going to focus on the conjugations. This is more going to be focused on the context in which they're used, okay? So let's go. Saber, as you know, it means to know. So when is saber used? Saber is used first of all to talk about facts, okay? Sé que España está en Europa. I know that Spain is in Europe. That's a fact. That's a geographical fact. So you have to use saber. You know this fact, right? So sé que España está en Europa. That's fact. Anything that's factual, we use saber. All right. 2. We use saber to express ability, which is also known as knowing how to do something. For example, mi padre sabe nadar. My father knows how to swim. Now pay attention here. So the formula for this is that we use saber followed by the infinitive of the verb. And that would translate as knowing how to do something. Notice we do not use como. Like in English we would say, my father knows how to swim, not knows to swim, knows how to swim. But there will be a tendency for Spanish students to put como because that's how it's done in English. But no, you don't use como. You say mi padre sabe nadar. So you use saber plus the infinitive. No. You can use como, but not in this context. You would use como if the subject changes. Alright? So you don't use saber como to talk about knowing how to do something. Alright? So let me give you an example. No sé cómo la gente bebe alcohol. I do not know how people drink alcohol. Notice that the subject changes. It's no longer talking about me. It's talking about people. No sé cómo la gente. So we're talking about la gente bebe alcohol. Alcohol. Right? So that is why that is a situation that you can use saber como if the subject changes. But if you're talking about expressing an ability, no, we don't use the como. Alright? So that's the second context. The third context is going to be information. Alright? ¿Sabes dónde está la biblioteca? Do you know where the library is? Alright? That's a question, of course, and it's asking for information. Right? So anytime you are asking for information or you are expressing information, you use saber. Okay? And a response to this question would be, you could say, sí, la biblioteca está al lado de la iglesia. Yes, the library is next to the church. Right? So anytime you're asking for information or giving information and you're using no, of course, you would use saber. Alright? Now, a few more points about saber. Whenever saber is used in the preterite, it will take on a different meaning. it would not mean to know. It would mean to find out. All right. So it would be a synonym of descubrir, which means to discover or to like learn, right? For example, yo supe que Argentina ganó el mundial. I learned that Argentina won the World Cup. So you're talking about learning something, right? Or discovering something. That's what saber would mean in the preterite. So anytime you want to use saber in the past tense, you would more than likely have to use the imperfect, because the imperfect would be used with these contexts, facts, ability, and information. But the only time you use saber in the preterite is if you want to talk about discovering something, all right? So let me give an example with the imperfect. Marcos sabía cocinar. That would translate as Marcus knew how to cook, right? Marcus knew how to cook. So you have to use the imperfect there, right? Because like I said, you only use the preterite if you want to talk about discovering something, all right? Another point about saber. Saber can actually mean to taste like something. But in this case, we would say saber a, followed by the preposition a, all right? For example, esta galleta sabe a chocolate. So this biscuit tastes like chocolate, right? Saber a, right? So that's another way that saber is used. It's talking about the flavor of something, okay? And finally, the verb saberse, right? That's not really used, but I'm still going to tell you what it means, okay? So if you were to see it. Saberse means to know something by heart. So if you want to say you know something by heart, you use saberse. For example, me sé esta canción. I know this song by heart. That means that you know it, you have memorized it, you know all the lyrics of it, right? And that was how you would express knowing something by heart. But that's not, like I said, that's not commonly used, but I still choose to inform you about it, right? All right. So we have done that. And that's something that's going to come up when we do Conocer as well, all right? So yes, this would be Saber, all right? And now we're going to proceed to Conocer. Okay, so we move on to Conocer. Now, Conocer has a slightly different meaning, or not slightly different meaning, but a different meaning to Saber, although it translates as know as well. Conocer actually means to be familiar. This is where it's used with the following elements, okay? But conocer would translate as to be familiar, right? So the first context in which conocer is used is with people or persons. Conozco a Marcos. I know Marcos. That means that I am familiar with Marcos, or it could also mean I am acquainted. We are like to be acquainted, right? So that means that Marcos and I are friends, okay? Conozco a Marcos. So whenever you use conocer with people, you know you have to use the personal a, because that's a grammar rule in Spanish that once a person is a direct object, you need to use the personal a, okay? So conozco a Marcos. That's the first context. We use conocer with people. Secondly, we use conocer with places. Los alumnos no conocen este restaurante. The students do not know this restaurant. All right, a restaurant is a place. So a place could be a country, a city, anything like that, right? Once it's a place, you use conocer, right? So los alumnos no conocen este restaurante. All right. And lastly, things. We use conocer with things, and that's what I was alluding to when I told you in the saber part that this would come up again, right? So let's see. No conocemos estos libros. We do not know these books, which means we're not familiar with these books, okay? Now, I said that conocer is used with things, but I also said that the verb saberse is used with things as well, but that is going to be used if you know something by heart. Like, that's where it's not really used. That's only if you know it by heart. But this is to be familiar with it. All right? So you will use conocer in that context, generally for things. But if you know it by heart, then you would use the verb saberse, not saber, saberse. Okay? So these are things. So you use conocer with things. People, places, and things. Now, a few more things about conocer. Conocer actually could mean to meet. If you're using it in like the preterite. Same, just like how saber has a different meaning in the preterite, conocer will have a different meaning, okay? So if you use conocer in the preterite, it means to meet for the first time. For example, ayer conocí al jefe, right? Yesterday I met the boss. So that would mean that before you would have never seen him, or you would have never met him before. But that is the first time that you had an encounter with him. So ayer conocí al jefe, right? So if you use conocer in the preterite, you're talking about meeting someone for the first time, all right? And in all the other contexts, you would use the imperfect, all right? For obviously to express these. So if you say conocía a Marcos, then that means that you knew Marcos. You were familiar with Marcos, right? But if you say conocí a Marcos, then that means that you met Marcos. And then, right, whatever encounter that was, you met him for the first time, all right? So that would be the imperfect and the preterite. Conocer also has a reflexive form, right? Conocerse, and it would mean to know oneself. So if I say me conozco, that means I know myself, right? But if I say Juan y Juana se conocen, that means that they know each other, all right? That's what that would mean. They know each other. But once again, if I put it in the preterite, that would mean that they met. So Juan y Juana se conocieron. That would mean that Juan and Juana met. They would have met each other for the first time. It wouldn't mean that they know each other. It would mean that they met, because remember, conocer in the preterite means to meet. But if I use the imperfect, Juan y Juana se conocían, then that means that they knew each other. Or if I use the present, Juan y Juana se conocen. They know each other. Alright? But if I use the preterite, it would be Juan and Juana met. Right? I can't just say conocieron because you actually want to talk about them meeting each other. You only would use conocieron if you have an object, something. If you want to meet someone else, right? Like if I say Juan y Juana conocieron a sus alumnos. Juan and Juana met, excuse me, met their students. That's the only time you would use conocer, Do you only use conocer without the reflexive part? But because you're saying that they met each other, you would say Juan y Juana se conocieron. Okay? Alright, so conocer is used with people, places, and things. And as you see, just like saber, it could have slightly different meanings when used in the preterite. Okay? Alright, so this brings us to the end of Saber and Conocer. Now we are going to proceed to a quiz. Okay, so we move on to the quiz. So now we can see if you understand how to use these two verbs. So of course you have to choose between Saber and Conocer based on the context. And you will see that Saber is on the left and Conocer is on the right. Okay, so let's go. 1. ¿Sabes o conoces a Roberto? Conoces, because we're talking about a person. Alright? So, do you know Roberto? So, if we're talking about a person, knowing a person, you have to use conocer. 2. Ayer supe o conocí que el partido fue cancelado. Yesterday, that the game was cancelled. That is information, and you're talking about the preterite, which means because we're talking about the preterite, saber takes on the meaning of found out. So saber, supe. Right? Let me put that strong there. So yesterday, I found out that the game was cancelled. Alright? 3. Quiero saber o conocer la verdad. What is la verdad? La verdad would be information, that means truth. So that would be saber. Quiero saber la verdad. I want to know the truth. 4. Pedro y Susana se saben o se conocen. You know that once you use the conocerse or saberse, you know that there is a slightly different meaning, but we're talking about persons knowing each other, so we use se conocen. Alright? So Pedro and Susana know each other. And you know that saberse is only used if you're talking about knowing something by heart. So it can't be that. And 5. La madre de Mariana sabe o conoce cocinar muy bien. So this is talking about a skill. So saber. Mariana's mother knows how to cook very well. All right. So that brings us to the end. Okay? So I hope that you answered everything correctly. Espero que ustedes entiendan mejor estos dos verbos. Muchas gracias por ver y nos vemos.